and welcome to Crimes Through Time, a weekly snapshot of crime history. The Kent family lived in a 3-storey mansion, Road Hill House in Wiltshire. On the morning of the 30th of June 1860, they rose to find 3-year-old Francis Saville missing from his bed. Tragically, he was found dead in the vault of a disused privy on the property. He had been the victim of a violent attack. Eyes of suspicion fell on the members of the family, with his nursemaid being arrested and released without charge. It would be 5 years before the killer would come forward and confess. It was Francis Saville's half-sister, Constance, who was only 16 at the time of the crime. What was the motive for such a young girl to turn on her little brother in such a horrific way? Or was she covering for somebody else? Let's explore the case and let me know what you think in the comments below. Samuel Kent was born in 1801. He was the son of a prosperous carpet manufacturer. His mother also came from money. Her family owned property in Colchester, Kent. In 1826, he met Mary Ann Windus, and they married on the 8th of June 1829 at St John's Church. They set up home in Finsbury Park, London. The couple would have 10 children, but only 5 of them would survive. One of them was Constance Emily Kent, born on the 6th of February 1844. Due to failing health, Samuel moved his family to Cliff Cottage, Sidmouth, and began a job as the sub-inspector of factories implementing the 1833 Factories Act. In 1839, Mary Drew Pratt was employed as governess and Harriet Gallop as parlourmaid. The Kent marriage was strained. Samuel would claim his wife was insane. Harriet characterised it as heartbreak and sadness. Mary Ann had experienced a lot of loss and had become aware that her husband was having an affair with the governess Mary Drew. The scandal caused the family to move in 1848 to Walton Manor in Somerset, but the gossip followed them and they moved in March 1852 to Bayton House, Wiltshire. On the 3rd of May, Mary Ann would fall ill with severe stomach pains. She suffered for 3 days before passing away. The loss of her mother had a lasting effect on young Constance, just 8 at the time. Samuel would go on to marry his mistress, Mary Drew. The ceremony took place on the 11th of August 1853. Constance and her sisters Mary Ann and Elizabeth were bridesmaids. Edward Kent, Constance's brother, had joined the service of the West Indian Royal Mail Packet Company in 1850, and in 1854 he was reported drowned off the coast of Balaclava when the ship he was serving on, the Kenilworth, sank. All hands were believed lost. But by some miracle, Edward would return as part of a small group who had survived by swimming to shore. Constance's first half-sibling, Mary Amelia, arrived in 1855, and in the autumn of that year the family would move to Road Hill House. In 1856, Constance disguised herself as a boy and ran away to sea with her brother William. They were 12 and 11 respectively. They were quickly caught in the Greyhound Hotel in Bath. They were returned home, beaten and locked in the cellar for 2 days. Francis Saville Kent was born in 1856. He would be known as Saville. He was a precocious and lively lad and soon became Samuel's obvious favourite. Unfortunately, 1858 would bring loss to the family when Edward died of yellow fever on board his ship the Clyde. He left £300 to his siblings in his will. Evelyn Kent would be born on October 1858. With all the small children to look after, Elizabeth Goff was hired as nursemaid and Constance was removed to boarding school in Beckington. On the 29th of June 1860, the family were all together at Road Hill. Mr. and Mrs. Kent slept on the 2nd floor with Mary Amelia. Across the landing was the nursery where Saville, Evelyn and Elizabeth, the nursemaid, slept. Constance and William also had their own rooms on the 2nd floor. All reported to have retired to their respective rooms to sleep that night. At around 5 a.m, Elizabeth woke and checked the children. Saville was missing, but she didn't worry too much as his mother had a habit of coming and taking him to sleep with her in the night. She returned to bed, rising to start the day at about 7 a.m. She dressed and went to Kent's room to get Saville for his morning routine. Of course he wasn't there. A frantic search of the house began. There were no signs of the child found in the house, although his cot had been slept in. The window in the drawing room was found open, despite the servants being adamant it was closed that evening. Samuel rode over to Trowbridge to fetch the police, fearing his son had been kidnapped. The alarm was also raised in the village, and local men formed search parties to find the missing boy. It was one of these group that found a disused servant's outhouse. Something had been stuffed into the privy. William Nutt, a local shoemaker, lifted out the bloody blanket, and inside was the body of 3-year-old Saville. His throat had been cut so deeply he had almost been decapitated. William remarked, quote, "His little head fell off, almost," end quote. Thomas Benger, a farmer, noted, quote, "His throat was cut and blood splashed over his face. He was a little dark around the mouth and eyes, but he looked quite pleasant, and his little eyes were shut," end quote. The Morning Chronicle announced, quote, "A crime has been committed, which for mystery, complication of probability, and hideous wickedness is without parallel in our criminal records," end quote. The local police quickly arrested Elizabeth Goff. After all, how could the boy be removed from the room without her knowledge? Their theory was that she had snuck a lover into the house and Saville had walked in on them. There was no evidence of this, it was pure speculation. Rumours soon started that she had confessed and that Samuel had been her lover. This was untrue, and she was eventually released. On the 15th of July, Jonathan Witcher was dispatched from Scotland Yard's detective branch. He was one of the original members of the branch and had worked there since its formation in 1842. He found out some very interesting information about life in the household. Samuel was living beyond his means and could no longer afford the school fees, meaning Constance was living back in the house full time. There had been a surprisingly high turnover of staff, 200 female members in just 4 years, and it was very clear that the older children from Samuel's first marriage were treated with a lot of resentment. Witcher was sure it was Constance. She had bore the brunt of the ill treatment. She had hidden things in the outhouse before, and the nightdress she wore that night was missing. Not much to go on, but he interviewed her for nearly a week, but she denied everything. It seems the newspapers agreed that a woman was responsible. Harper's Weekly reported, quote, "It was generally agreed that a girl or woman must have been concerned in the affair, because after the blanket in which the child's body was wrapped, it had been folded down with a neatness and care that a man is unlikely to exhibit," end quote. Witcher returned to London, saying, quote, "He will only know the truth when Constance Kent confesses," end quote. The local police rearrested Elizabeth Goff and put her before the magistrates. The case went nowhere, as there was still no evidence. The case went cold. The scrutiny and gossip was too much for Samuel, and he moved his family to Wales. Constance was sent to a convent finishing school in France. The confession Witcher wanted came in 1865, 5 years after the murder. Constance confessed to an Anglo-Catholic clergyman, Reverend Arthur Wagner. She told him she wished to face justice. He helped her to return to England, and on the 25th of April 1865, aged 21, she walked into Bow Street Magistrates and confessed to the murder of little Saville. She had waited for the household to fall asleep, first opening the drawing room shutters and window. She then picked up Saville gently from his bed, wrapped in a blanket from his cot. She then carried him to the privy and carried out the crime. Constance had already hidden a razor stolen from her father and matches for light in the outhouse. This was not a spontaneous act, but one carried out with much planning. Her motive, revenge. She wanted to hurt her father by killing his favourite, and to punish her stepmother for betraying her mother before taking her place. She stated she bore no ill will towards little Saville. The newspapers had a field day, with Harper's Weekly reporting, quote, "With an iron will, and iron nerves, and an iron wrist, she lifted her own brother from the happy sleep of innocence and almost hacked his head off." End quote. Some didn't believe her version of events, including Charles Dickens. Many thought that Samuel was the one who had killed his son in a fit of rage to cover an affair. He did have a reputation for being an adulterer, and rumours were rife about the constant stream of female servants through his employ. He was known as an arrogant, bad-tempered man who was rude and lascivious to the servants. But what would be the benefit to Constance to confess to protect her father, a man who removed his parental affections from her when he started a new family? No one was actively investigating. He wasn't under the risk of arrest. Another theory is that it was William, Constance's brother, that she was covering up for him. They had a deep sibling relationship given their father's behaviour. He would definitely be a person that she would protect. But again, why confess? In reality, she had got away with it. She was very pained to make sure people knew she had acted alone, so maybe they were accomplices. It is a very manual job that would have required strength to carry a sleeping 3-year-old through a window and across the property. A lot for a slight 16-year-old girl. Constance pleaded guilty at her trial in July 1865, but refused to answer any questions. Within 30 minutes, Constance was sentenced to death by hanging. But Queen Victoria commuted the sentence to life in prison due to her young age at the time of the crime and that she had confessed. She spent 20 years behind bars. She was released in 1885, aged 41. In 1886, she emigrated to Australia to join her brother William in Tasmania. She changed her name to Ruth Emily Kay. There she trained as a nurse. She had a long and distinguished career, retiring in 1932. There is no record of any inappropriate or criminal behaviour. Constance would pass peacefully at the age of 100 on the 10th of April 1944 in a private hospital just outside Sydney. She was cremated and interred at Rockwood Cemetery. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and let me know what you think of this case in the comments below, and I look forward to welcoming you in the next one.